I'm Shane.
And I'm Alex.
And this is the RPM podcast.
Hello and welcome to launch number 7 of 10. Getting close to the end of our launch period. And it's another new name for the grid for 2021. The Aston Martin Cognizant Formula One team. It's a little bit of a mouthful. But we're here to discuss their launch today as the Aston Martin brand returns to Formula One for the first time since the 50s, I believe it is.
It's been a fair few years.
Maybe 1960. As a proper works team. Obviously, they featured with Red Bull for some time. But we're here to discuss their launch program, where we got to meet the drivers and the staff, and a little bit about the team as a whole. We'll be discussing all of it, including the livery and any technical specifications over the course of the next 20 minutes or so. So without further ado, let's move on.
So like Alex said, we're here to do a complete debrief of the new Aston Martin AMR21. And the show was very well put together, coming off the back of yesterday's launches, especially the Alpine one. I was a little bit nervous about another live stream, but Aston Martin had everything ticked. Everything was done perfectly well. The stream started off with a bit of a trailer, and it's not the first time we've seen a trailer for a new team this year or a hype trailer for the 2021 season. A 3-minute trailer going through the heritage of Aston Martin, what it means back in when they did Formula One, their British links. The show was very heavily linked to Britain. I'm sure we'll touch on that later on as well, and just a bit of a story of Aston Martin. And I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed that trailer. It didn't feel like it was like a new team coming in and they're going to settle for, midway through the field. It was a trailer which means business. I kind of had a feeling that they were going to try and aim for the top. It just got me a bit hyped up more than any other trailer I've watched this year. I don't know if that's me or what do you think? What did you think of that 3-minute trailer?
Did Christopher Nolan direct that trailer? It had that kind of like vibe to it, didn't it? I can't say that I enjoyed it particularly. I found it quite beguiling and a bit muddled. There was lots of it started with, what's his name? Santan Dave. Started with him, didn't it? He did a little introduction and he was doing the voiceover. And it started with, we're going to tell you a story. But then it didn't really tell a story. It was a sort of a lot of washed out and rather enigmatic footage and half glimpses and otherworldliness. And it was like, what is this? You're not really telling us a story at all. It was just lots of fast cuts of just stuff and some old footage of them, presumably when they were in motor racing in the 50s and 60s. And part of it came across almost like a dystopian political party broadcast. It was all of these vague messages. I definitely heard the phrase, the creation of a glorious power. I definitely heard that phrase in the middle of it. What does that mean?
I struggled to pick up on...
This is a couple of phrases I got from it. I wrote some of them down because there was loads of stuff. It was all sorts of...
I'll enjoy this.
Obviously, it started with, we're going to tell you a story. And then it was seeing a future and knowing the past. A story before time where we could only listen. Where dreams were pure and meant everything. Memory and roar of truth and the creation of a glorious power. Seeing above the sky and stars. What is this? What does any of this mean? This isn't a story. This is just random phrases. And
it was those phrases which got me hyped up.
Yeah, that was the effect of it. That was the effect of it. It was very beguiling. It was very exciting. But when you actually if you turn your brain on, it actually makes no sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like big bold phrases, but they didn't actually link together to produce any kind of context.
If you let yourself kind of let it wash over you, then I can see how it would be really exciting and fast paced and lots of stuff and bits and parts and noise and things. But yeah, I found that when I watched it for the second time and actually thought about it, I was like, this makes no sense and is a really confusing mess and does not tell a story at all. So sorry, I really didn't like it.
Well, there you have it, listeners. Alex and I don't always agree on things. It's happened in the past, usually on post-race discussions, but here we are talking about the Aston Martin launch and already at polar opposite ends. But it happens. It makes some good discussion.
So that was the video. And then we moved on to, it was Gemma Arterton who was hosting, wasn't it? And the overall tone was a little bit little bit stiff, a little bit not particularly fluent, but
There were some
both
bits better
drivers
than
I thought
other.
were. Yeah, the best bit was when both drivers started. They had a little Q&A session near the end. That was definitely the best bit because both drivers were quite good at making it more natural. I mean, Seb is always like very earnest, isn't he? So, and Stroll was very good as well. So yeah, that was a bit better, and there was definitely a mix of pre-recorded and live, I thought.
Mm.
And that started. One of the pre-recorded bits I think was when we saw the man himself, who I expected to see. Lawrence Stroll came out for a little while. The Elder Strolls.
Amazing. Yes.
I don't really know where I'm going with that, to be honest. But anyway, he came out as I thought he would and had a little chat and talked about how it was his dream to own a Formula One team and own a bit of Aston Martin. And there he was.
Yep. He came out and gave a very kind of, not a political speech, but a very, I don't know what the word I can use to describe it. A very
He was
sensible.
trying to be inspirational and like the leadership speech, wasn't he? Right?
Apart from he was saying all the right things, however, the emotion on his face wasn't there, which makes me wonder whether he was obviously just reading off a teleprompter, and that was the feeling I got through the whole kind of launch, that people kept on glancing back to the camera to see what their next words were or to see what they had to say. But it was nice that he came out, and it was also nice that he wasn't, the overarching kind of theme for the whole launch. We had little snippets of Lance, we had the Aston Martin director, and we had obviously Gemma come and go, and then the two drivers as well. So it was a nice balance between team principal, and Otmar Sattler. Yeah, so it was a good balance between team principal and drivers and owners, I thought, which was quite nice. It wasn't too overpowering. It didn't get too boring, which I found some of the other launches a little bit boring, where it was just 20 minutes of speech from like the team directors and what they want to achieve, but never really name anything. So I thought it was handled quite well, the balance that was.
Yeah, there was still quite a lot of the typical sort of corporate waffle about we're putting the pieces in place and our ambitions are limitless and we're communicating the evolution of Aston Martin and all this stuff that it doesn't really mean anything.
I wish I'd counted how many times they said, if it's as fast as it looks, we're going to have a world championship winning car.
That was another popular one.
I thought it was funny when I heard it twice, and I thought, oh, okay, they said the same thing twice now, but it must have been 5 or 6 times by the end of the launch. I was like, well, I know it's a good looking car, don't get me wrong, but let's hear about other things as well.
So that was another part of the overall program that was pretty prominent, is that we've already mentioned Santan Dave at the start and Gemma Arterton. There's a lot of celebs. They were drawing on some big names. We had Tom Brady weighing in for some reason. There he was, Tom Brady. And of course, they had to get Daniel Craig in to do his James Bond bit. So yeah, we had a lot of big names coming in. Was there anybody else? I'm trying to remember if there was any other famous people.
I don't think so. It was just the American star and Daniel Craig, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I think it was just those.
Yeah, and so then we had a little bit from, you mentioned we talked a little bit from the Aston CEO, Otmar Sapnauer. We also heard from the CEO of Cognizant, who didn't really have anything to say as far as I could tell. And then there was a little bit from Otmar as he talked about the team's ambitions, and that's where we got a little bit of meat on the bones, as it were. One thing that he did say was that he said that 4th place was a good result, but that they want to move forward. So they're clearly aiming to fight at the top of the midfield. They played up Stroll's youth and Vettel's experience. And we also heard from Andrew Green, the technical director, who talked about, he was a little bit more realistic. He was a little bit more, we know where we are. We've got to be realistic about where we stand. And then we heard a little bit from the drivers. What did you make from what we heard from Stroll and Seb?
Well, they both, I think Stroll, the first thing he said was, if it's as fast as it looks, and I thought, here we go again.
That one.
But I thought it was quite natural. We touched on it at the start of this podcast, how actually it was a little bit robotic, this launch. It was very scripted, but then the drivers came in and it was very fluent. Like you said, Seb has a way with just talking to people, and he won't stick to the script. He won't, hide away from the cameras. He'll just be honest. So when he said, when they asked him, how do you think it's gonna go? Where do you think you're gonna be? His answer was, I'm not too sure. I haven't driven the car yet. It's hard to speculate this time of year, instead of giving these unrealistic expectations about, oh, we're going to be 3rd or we're going to be 2nd. I mean, this is coming from a driver who has just left Ferrari. So he's coming from one team and going straight into another. He also opened up and said that the controls and the buttons in the car were in complete different place to his Ferrari, which I thought was interesting. It was like the very small bit of technical insight we got from the drivers. It was a bit, they kind of avoided any like promises about the car, what their expectations were, etc. But Seb's little insight to having to adapt to the car, the buttons are in different places in the cockpit. So I found that quite interesting. I'm quite a fan of the technical side of it. I don't like listening to where they think they're going to finish, what their goals are. I like to see, I like the technical bits. But Stroll handled himself quite well as well. He's definitely, I think those two together are going to be a really good team. They seem to bounce off quite well of each other. They're answering each other's questions. They had a nice conversation in the middle when the fans were answering, were asking questions. So as a team, I think as a pairing, I think they're going to work together really well. They've got the experience of Sebastian Vettel, and they did say they've got this young superstar, Lance Stroll. Obviously, we'll see if that materializes in a couple of years or not, but they've definitely got that experience of Seb Vettel. As for the questions, they were as expected, really. They were very as expected for a car launch.
It was interesting that they chatted about their favourite corners. That was a bit of fun. They both talked about their love for Suzuka, ultimately. Yeah. But that was followed by a few pointless questions like, do you like dogs or cats?
Yeah, who's James Bond, who's Q?
So, right, okay. Yeah, the corners question was interesting. That was fun and interesting. Yeah. And the rest of it was like, let's think of some fun questions. Like, right, yeah, okay, whatever.
They had 15,000 people email in with different questions, and they picked like one great question about the corner and then two unrelated ones. And I was like, oh no, the stream's just got a bit boring now. Chuck some more like F1 questions in there. What's your least favorite corner? What's your most favorite track? The kind of stuff we quite like to hear about drivers.
I'm trying to remember what the other questions were. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
there was definitely the one about dog and cats and who's Q and who's James Bond.
I'm sure there was one more, but I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. But that bit was kind of interesting. That was a little bit of levity, I suppose, for all of the sort of corporate style announcements and the like. Just before we move on to the car itself and we talk technical stuff and livery, etc., I spoke a little bit last night after we finished recording our Alpine episode. I talked to you a little bit about how I was starting to feel towards Aston Martin as a McLaren fan.
Share it with the listeners.
Yeah. So Aston Martin, their kind of establishment in Formula One after the takeover by Lawrence Stroll and his Lawrence Stroll-led consortium, I should say. Some people have described it as him trying to make a British Ferrari, in that it is a patriotic brand that draws on its history and its unique heritage and its patriotism, if you like, to inform its design and all this sort of stuff. We think about Ferrari and we think of the, passion of Italians and all this sort of stuff. So the other two ostensibly British teams in Formula One are also full of their own history and have unique heritage status, of course. But both got started in Formula One, and only McLaren became a car manufacturer after the fact. Whereas Aston Martin, established in 1913, something like that, British cultural icon associated with other British cultural icons like James Bond, as we saw in the launch. And in a way, they'd also be a bit like Mercedes too, in that they had a spell in F1 back before, in the earlier era of the sport. Although, unlike Mercedes, I don't think Aston Martin did very well. I think they entered about 5 races and
they didn't do many, did they?
Were a bit rubbish. Whereas Mercedes actually were a championship-winning team back in that period of time. That's probably why their video was so vague, because they didn't really have a lot to say about Aston Martin in Formula One. It's just, here's some images and somebody saying some things. So with all of that in mind, I must confess that I've started to look towards Aston Martin as a bit of a rival to McLaren, especially after what happened last season when they were Racing Point. And I openly admit that I really want to see McLaren beat Aston Martin next season. And I'm putting it on record now so that I can be called out if anybody thinks that, I'm biasing my analysis of any of the races this season. I'm putting it on record so you can call me out if it affects anything. But I kind of see Aston Martin as something of a rival team to McLaren going into this season, and I can't quite shake that feeling. So I thought I'd be honest and say how I feel about it.
There was definitely a overarching feeling with the launch that this was a very British team. And I know, obviously, like you said, we've got McLaren, we've got Williams, who are obviously British-based teams, but we had the Union Jack over the car. We had very well-spoken British presenters, which just stuck out to me that they were really pushing for this British connection. It's Aston Martin Racing. We are the dominant British racing team. We are the team which everyone should rally up again, rally behind. And like you, I'm a McLaren fan. I'd love to see them do well this year. I think getting another third place would be great for McLaren, and they're going to have some competition on their hands. But Aston Martin have come in strong, and with the initial trailer and the Union Jack over the flag, and just every so often there was another little link to another British icon or a British figure, or we're doing this because we've got this British heritage. And like you said, I can't help but feel they're launching this massive attack on other British teams to take that top spot. It's almost like they've got their own little championship out of all of the British manufacturers, and they want to be top dog. And like you said, we're both McLaren fans. We haven't hid that in previous podcasts. We quite like it when they do well, but it does feel a bit threatening. And I don't know if that makes me excited or nervous going forward. I really don't. But the fact that they were pushing so much British culture or British connections on their launch just made me feel like they want to be top dog. They want to be the Formula One team that the British people think of when they think about Formula One.
There was a little bit of that going on with Alpine as well. Obviously, they pushed the French side of it, but they also talked about, I think Ocon said something like combining French style with British grit or something like that. So there's a little bit of talk of that sort of thing with the teams, which is interesting and plays into all sorts of stuff to do with brands and advertising and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I thought it was interesting to point out maybe how we feel about it and the potential threat that they have in that midfield. They don't want to be just competing in the midfield. They want to start aiming higher and become one of the big three, big four, whatever number it ends up being.
They said they wanted. They said they weren't there to stay still. They were there to move forward, even in this year. So it's
what if
positive
their trailer
signs.
video is anything to go by? They're going to defy gravity and time.
Mercedes
and make the past become the future.
Exactly.
And,
I'm not sure what that means with their past.
The creation of a glorious power, which sounds like some kind of makes them sound like a fascist government.
It's just, well, yeah. I don't know what else to say about it.
That just really made me laugh when I watched it. I was like, the creation of what?
Yeah.
What now? What is this? Is this a perfume advert?
What am I watching?
Did Terrence Malick direct this? What is this? Anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about the car. Let's talk about the technicals. So, we obviously heard a bit from Andrew Green. He didn't really say too much technical stuff that I remember. It was pretty vague.
Pretty hush-hush.
Yeah, technical-wise, we do know that they have the rear suspension from the W11 from last year, which doesn't cost them any tokens because it's coming from Mercedes. Otherwise, just looking at some of the photos that we had, the engine cover was a bit different to the W12, considering obviously both Mercedes engined. Also different to the now Mercedes engined MCL35M. Whether or not they will look exactly like that when it comes to them being on the track, we don't really know. All of this is a little bit not 100% certain yet until we actually see them on track, of course.
Got to take it with a pinch of salt. And even when you see them on track for the first day, I'm sure they'll be running a couple of reserved parts. I think first day is all about, it's just about mileage at the end of the day. And then they'll start introducing the new spec parts as late as possible, but within enough time for them to get the data they need.
So it looked a little bit, slimmer perhaps on the engine cover, some slightly different bulges in places, but not too much to draw on there without just merely speculating. It did also have a very pinched, very slim nose design, even slimmer than before perhaps, but otherwise didn't look too different. Couldn't really tell much that was different on the front wing compared to the way that the Racing Point was by the end of last season. Anything else that you spotted?
Nothing comes to mind, but like you said, the nose is so thin compared to last year, and compared to any other car launch this year, it's dramatically thinner. There's a good photo which I will share on Twitter later on of all the front end of the cars which have launched so far this year and what the different styles of nose cones there are. And this is by far the thinnest. So they're going for a slightly different angle. And you mentioned the bulge on the back. Obviously, they're running a Mercedes engine and the Mercedes has got a bulge, but this is quite a big bulge on the back of their engine casing. So whether they're just trying to keep everything else as tight as possible, I'm not quite sure, but ever so slightly different.
And we did actually get to see the car. We saw the car itself.
Yes.
It wasn't just like some digital thing because obviously they took
Mm.
the cover off it and everything. It really was the car. So we did actually get to have a proper look at it. And there was lots of long lingering shots with the music playing. We got a proper good look at the car, which I respect. I'm glad that we got to see it. Again, it's hard to tell how much of it is actually what's going to be on the car when it comes to hit the track. But yeah, we got a good look at it and that was nice. So should we talk livery now then?
Yes.
What do you
Who
think?
wants to start? Okay, I'll start. I was on social media this morning before the launch, and F1 and a couple of other people I follow were throwing up some renders. And some of them I liked and some of them I didn't like. And it made me realize that I was a little bit nervous about this launch because they have the potential to design a very good looking car. And I didn't want them to mess it up. Well, I didn't want to dislike it. And I'm happy to announce that I'm a big fan of this car. I think it looks great. Even I'm glad we got those real life shots as well because it just confirms that it looks as good as it does in the renders. Obviously, they've got the pink. It's a proper hot pink. It is a really, really vibrant pink, but subtle enough to not overthrow the whole Aston Martin look. So, a couple of renders I saw, it was you could have had quite a lot of pink on that car, and I wasn't quite sure whether I liked it or not. Some people started referring to it as the watermelon, but actually, the pink they do have on this car very subtle. It's subtle in a way where there's small quantities, but it's bright pink, and I'm a massive fan of it. On the side pod, on the side of the car, you've got that strip of pink from the very start to the end. Almost reminds me of the Patronus blue from the Mercedes. They've almost just copied that and gone pink. And
Even
again,
the livery design is similar to Mercedes.
I know, the Mercedes W13.2, whatever it is. But I'm a big fan. I could talk to you about how big a fan I am of it for a long time. There's a couple of sponsors on there. We've got the Aston Martin logo as well. Not completely covered in sponsors as well, which I'm really pleased about. They've kept like a lot of the space clear. Obviously, coming off the back of the Mercedes launch with all that AMG on the back, it didn't really do it for me. But this is a nice, clean, sponsor light, good looking car.
Yeah, they've definitely been clever with the placement of the sponsors and it complements it well. Yeah, my overall thoughts are very similar, other than obviously being very similar to Mercedes. Despite what I've said before about my feelings towards the team as a whole, I have to admit that I love this livery. The color is absolutely spot on.
Yep.
Love the satin of the paint and the texture that adds. I like that it's kept fairly simple. Like you, I saw some of the designs that people post online. They were always just a bit too overcomplicated, like trying to do a bit too much. And it's like the number one mistake that people tend to make with those liveries is that there's just too much going on and it's trying to create loads of bits and parts and shapes. And everyone always says how much they love the, I think the MCL34, where it had the diamonds. The McLaren that had the blue and orange and blue diamonds. Wasn't that wild about that car. It was all right. So yeah, I tend to find that the people lean towards a bit of overcomplication. I love how simple this is. I love that they haven't tried to do any funny business like Mercedes with the engine cover that just keeps it clean. But also you get plus the accents of pink that you already mentioned, but also those accents on the JCB logos as well. They just add a little bit extra too, just a nice color to add. They've not overdone it. They've kept it nice and simple. Yeah, this is really, really nice. I do really like this livery, and I'll feel like I'll be able to give an even better assessment once we actually see the real thing on track, as well as under lights when we get to Bahrain. That'll be very nice. But
of course,
this is one of the best looking cars we've had so far for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's just I was very pleased when it got launched. I was very pleased that it was very simple. Like you said, I didn't want it to be overcomplicated. There were some designs with a huge Aston Martin winged logo on the back, and it just looked really busy. But they've kept it simple. They've kept it nice and clear, and I'm a massive fan. Like you said, as much as they'll probably be McLaren's biggest competition this year, along with Ferrari, I have to give it to them. It's a very good-looking car.
And the launch overall was generally pretty good. Like I said, I've already expressed my personal dislike of that video thing they did. I thought it was pretentious, and a lot of the stuff that went on was so-so. But yeah, it was a bit of fun near the end with the Q&A, and they did a good job of launching this kind of overall sense of the patriotic brand and the British works team. I talked before about trying to establish this like British Ferrari or whatever. They've certainly done a good job of that, and it will be very interesting to see whether they can put their money where their mouth is and produce some results on track.
So there we have it. Finally, the Aston Martin AMR21 has been launched. What do you think of the livery? Have we missed anything? Send us your thoughts and questions to us at RacePerMinute on Twitter, or you can get in touch with us at RacePerMinute.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can drop us a comment. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a like rating. And if you really like what we do, please consider subscribing wherever you get the podcast. And if you really want to show the show some support and help us keep the quality content coming and receive some lovely rewards by donating as little as £1 a month at patreon.com/RacePerMinute.